Welcome to the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. My guest is back again. I had a fantastic interview with him. I'm not sure exactly when it was. I usually check these things, but it was about a year ago or a bit more. But we had a fantastic conversation. You're the author of 4 books on leadership and business innovation, including the bestseller, The Amazon Way. And I think we discussed that actually the first time you were around. You're an early Amazon executive who played a key role in launching the Amazon marketplace business in 2002. You're a leading keynote speaker on leadership for innovation and transformation. You have served as senior technology advisor at the Gates Foundation and senior innovative advisor at T-Mobile. And we're going to go into detail on your new book, which I've read and thoroughly enjoyed. And you're also the founder of the Rossman Partners, a strategy and leadership solution firm. Please welcome John Rossman.
Roy, thanks for welcoming me back. It's great to be here.
No, like to be honest with you, it's one of these books like you're reading it and you're going, "Ooh, that's interesting," because sometimes we don't think of things till we kind of understand it. But
Right.
you've got fantastic experience, so I just kind of touched on it. But I suppose maybe first of all, kind of let people know your journey and who really John is and your experience, so they kind of understand why this book you've got the experience to write it.
Yeah. So, I mean, the quick story on that is I was an early leader at Amazon. I left, and at one of my clients, the Gates Foundation, I had a client recommend that I capture all the anecdotes and strategies from Amazon because I used them effectively in our work. And so I released the Amazon Way. Fast forward, had a few great roles, one of which was I got to be the senior innovation advisor at T-Mobile for 3 years. What we did at T-Mobile is all about new business incubation, kind of new businesses beyond the core wireless business. My key client was Kevin McCaffrey, and we took a lot of the strategies and mechanisms from Amazon and incorporated them for a company that distinctly did not want to be Amazon. And we had a very specific mission, which was kind of how to incubate and think beyond the core wireless business. Out of that work, we learned so much. And so I was thinking about like, what's the next book? And I framed it as big bet leadership. And I sent an early proposal to who was my client at T-Mobile, Kevin McCaffrey. And Kevin immediately called me back and he goes, "John, I've been waiting for you to do something like this." So I talked him into being my co-author of Big Bet Leadership. So Big Bet Leadership is specifically for senior leaders and the teams that serve senior leaders at companies for these strategies and plans that we call big bets. Now, these get called a lot of things within an organization. They get called a growth strategy. They get called a market repositioning. They get called a digital transformation. They get called an AI strategy. They get called an operating model redesign. But what all of these have is 2 core attributes. They have high potential impact for the business, and there's a very complex risks, unknown unknowns, and dependencies on others. And so this playbook is specifically for kind of those high risk, high reward strategies and a leadership model that encourages people to follow kind of 3 critical habits: create clarity, maintain velocity, and accelerate risk and value. And that's the story of big bet leadership right there.
Yeah, excellent. And like for 2 people that have been at very senior level, how did you navigate kind of writing a book together? Was the ego getting in the way, or did you just kind of gel together?
No, Kevin and I had a long working history together. I also, we were very clear up front. We set expectations well about, what our roles and how we were going to work. And that really set the stage for a great relationship. But like anything hard, tension isn't just a negative thing. Tension is the thing that forces you to get to good. And so Kevin was so good about pushing back and contributing and forcing us to get to that clarity and get to the what he would always refer to as the curiosity gap. Like, you got to make it interesting and pull people through the book. So we feel like we did a very good job of creating a great narrative, keeping it short, spicy, to the point. We don't repeat ourselves much. And we offloaded from the book a lot of what people put into books, which are kind of the templates and detailed explanations and kind of the tools. So if you get the book, Big Bet Leadership, you also get access to a number of online tools to help you put the book into action. And that keeps the book both very readable and very good audio version of the book also. And so we had some design principles up front that kind of led us down that path.
And just curious with the audio, did you do the voice yourself or did you just hire somebody to do the
No, we did it. We did an actor, and it was kind of a funny story. I was working with the publishing company on what sort of style they wanted. And I had just listened to a book, and it was Art of the Impossible by Stephen Kotler. And I said, I really liked the voice actor for that book and his name, so if you have somebody that sounds like Fred Sanders, that would be great. And they came back and they go, oh, we know Fred, and he's got availability in his calendar. So we were able to get Fred Sanders to read the book, and he does a very nice, even toned, readable, crisp version of the audiobook.
Excellent. So, like, there's a few points I want to go through, but let's because you mentioned like the T-Mobile, and you've got some stories on that, and I think that because even with me personally, it was like I had a pet peeve with all the phone companies, just the way they treat you, and I've been with T-Mobile for I don't know 10 years or something like that. Like, I just found they're different, but it's like they were watching what was going on and created something different.
Well, yeah, and we open the book, Big Bet Leadership, with the story, and this is T-Mobile US, right? Not T-Mobile Europe and Germany, but we open the story with 2012, John Ledger, who is the CEO of T-Mobile at CES, and he opens up with this profane ridden announcement about how he was declaring war against the incumbent cellular providers. And, this was the start of the uncarrier move at T-Mobile. And if, it's hard to remember, but at the time we were locked into contracts. We had to buy the phones. There was roaming fees. There was overage fees. There was data fees. There was all of these customer unfriendly lock-in moves that cell providers would do. And T-Mobile fundamentally went from a fourth place irrelevant provider to being the market leader and the innovator in a category that is not known for innovation. And we think that creating that combination of kind of a customer-centric mission and creating the clarity around it, he demonstrated all of the critical habits of big bet legends, which are, again, create clarity, maintain velocity, accelerate risk and value. And so over the next 8 years, T-Mobile did a series of uncarrier moves that in general all changed the traditions of a moribund industry and worked in the favor of customers. And that's how T-Mobile did it. And so, the whole book is both the techniques and the stories of big bet legends, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, John Ledger from T-Mobile, and Satya Nadella from Microsoft, and how they go about embodying and demonstrating those three critical habits. And we reverse engineer, especially a lot of Amazon's techniques for doing those things, of thinking through things so much better and debating and writing them than most companies do. So, and that's the story of T-Mobile. And again, we took these Amazon principles and reverse engineered them specifically for a circumstance and for a company that created our own version of kind of creating clarity of how to go about doing this type of work.
What I like as well, because sometimes people, you can see what's happening and they kind of say, oh, this is how this company is successful. But you've given examples as well as kind of, when you like Jeff Bezos kind of ripped your head off, let's say, like, it was about the merchants. So you might kind of touch on that because I think people learn from that as well when things aren't just going, because people see the results and the success stories and that's all they do. But you're giving a lot of examples, both things that weren't working and how people were being treated and stuff like that.
let's set the context for these big bets, which again are digital transformations, market repositionings, any of these high risk, high value endeavors. The vast majority of them, any place between 70 and 90% of these types of initiatives fail. And so these are high risk situations, right? And by failure, I don't mean just not on time and on budget. I mean, they don't deliver the expected impact in which they were expected to deliver. So there's a lot of studies backing up this type of points. But one of the the largest studies said that only 0.5% of large complex initiatives deliver on time, on value, and deliver the impact that they were expected to deliver. So this is very, very hard to do. Fundamentally, what you have to do is you have to take an exploratory, agile approach to proving these things out and adjusting them to get them right before you make big commitments. And what most companies do is they do the exact opposite. They start off with a very vague notion of what they're trying to fix within their company and an even more vague notion of what the future state is. They make big commitments around it. And at that point, in so many ways, you are locked in and you are on this journey, this essential journey to nowhere. And so the entire framework is about how to create clarity, create what we call the big bet vector, a very well-defined understanding of the problem we're trying to solve and our hypothesis for what the future state is. And then how do we use that big bet vector across the entire life cycle of proving and refining this concept until the time when it no longer is actually a big bet. It's just a big investment because it's been proven out. It's a super smart thing to do. And that's why this is truly about enterprise agility versus making big commitments upfront and then just proceeding and being locked into that vision.
Excellent. And there was one of the things that I saw, and I know that a lot of companies make a mistake on this one, and it was like having a direct, I think the way a DPI, direct responsible individual. Because normally what happens is they'll go, "Oh, Jimmy here, he's brilliant. Let's put this on his lap. This is your next pet project, but you're still doing everything else you're doing." And it's like why a lot of projects actually fail. And what you're kind of touching on is like, no, you get somebody specific that's their baby, and they look after this baby.
Yeah, the most predictable and controllable factor of the success of these big bets is the leadership model that you put around it. And fundamentally, that's why this is called big bet leadership and not big bet strategy or big bet problem solving. It is fundamentally about leadership. And we wrote this book for a couple of specific personas. The senior executive that's overseeing and sponsoring this type of initiative, oftentimes the president or CEO. And secondly, the person who is accountable for delivering it. And as you said, oftentimes there's a couple of mistakes that get made. First of all, is they give this as a part-time project to an operator in the business. And the problem is that the current business always dominates their priority. And it also gives them a fallback like, okay, this is a high risk thing. I'm not fully going to commit to it. And the second mistake they make is they tend to put kind of a mid-level person or even an individual contributor as the project manager. Well, this is fundamentally about a transformation. A individual contributor does not have the sway, they don't have the background, they don't have the relationships, either internally or externally or with the board to be successful. So a very important concept is at Amazon, we called it a single-threaded leader. In the book, we referred to as a DRI, a directly responsible individual. And this is a senior person who is fully committed not to the success of this big bet, but to testing this big bet out. And there's a big difference between those two mentalities. The entire mission of big bet leadership is to maintain the ambition of this strategy while proving out the risks that are inherent to it. You need a dedicated leader with a small but dedicated team to do the work to prove it out. And that's the story that you're talking about, Roy.
Another kind of, and this can happen with any size business, but it's kind of the language that you use, negative and positive. And it's like, because I know you touched on that, and I think it's very important because I've seen that. I mean, I've had a lot of companies that I've been working for people as well. I've seen it, and it's kind of like, this isn't working because this is which I class as the negative, as opposed to the positive. How do we make this to work? We know the issue that we've got. So maybe you might just touch on negative versus positive in language for projects.
Well, the framing, as you're pointing out, the framing on how you talk about like what the journey is, what the work to be done is very important. And an example would be, you know, we're going to undergo a digital transformation and we're committed to this digital transformation. Well, there's a couple of real problems with that framing. We're not specific about what the problem is that we're solving. We're not specific about what the future state is, but what we are doing is like we are absolutely committed to it versus how we would approach it in big bet leadership. In big bet leadership, we would focus you on getting very clear about the problem that we're trying to solve that requires some type of digital retooling or digital transformation. We'd be very specific about what we think the future state is, but we would frame it as a hypothesis. We think that this is the future state and how it's going to work and what the benefits are going to be and what a day in a life of a customer and employee would going to be. And then we would talk about the journey of testing and refining that big hypothesis. And so just in the framing of what I'm doing, what we're communicating is like, we think this is a good idea, but we're not positive. We are committed to testing this out versus we are committed to the end game and to the financials on it. What this allows everybody to do is to be successful in doing the job to be done, which is to test it out versus the commitments of what the outcomes are going to be. These are too high risk. There's too many unknown unknowns, too many dependencies to make those commitments up front. And then you lock everybody in. But that's what happens all the time. And that's why the failure statistics are there for these things, is because people think that by committing up front, that actually helps the success. That actually detracts from the success of these types of big bets.
And on the finance side, and like I think you mentioned earlier about like Elon and SpaceX and stuff like that. But like I think sometimes when, especially big organizations, some people get complacent and they think, oh, we've massive budgets, and they kind of forget that at the end of the day, you have to be watching the figures as well.
Especially in innovation programs, so within a major enterprise, these innovation, and I've gotten to witness and participate in a number of these types of things. These innovation programs are more for show than for really delivering value. And we kind of call them all hat no cattle, meaning it's just for show. It's not really to deliver impact at the end of the day. So one of the innovations that we deliver in the book is a set of memos to help a team drive the clarity that's required at what the problem and what's the future state. And one of those memos we call the outcome financial memo. And what it does is it identifies not just what the business case is for an innovation or an innovation program, but it actually recognizes the inherent nature of the risks that get baked into financial plans and pulls them forward into the testing process. And so this reverse income statement, designing for a specific financial outcome, is a very critical, important part of actually innovating. But what happens in most companies is they focus exclusively on the customer experience, which is important, but you have to match it with both an operational model and a financial model. They come in with a business case initially, but it quickly gets left behind. It quickly gets just resolved as like, yeah, that's what we're targeting, but they actually don't recognize the inherent risk in that financial model. And again, pull forward the critical things, the couple of critical things that would have to be true in order for that financial model. So in the book, in Big Bet Leadership, we tell a lot of stories, but we tell the story of one digital transformation and how the team got focused on a hard but not high risk aspect of the job, which was to do a billing system. But what they didn't recognize was that the real critical hypothesis being made was the customer acquisition cost. Could they attract a customer at a unit economic that was critical to the success of it? And it wasn't until after 18 months, when they had done the hard but not high risk thing of deploying a billing system and a go to market, that then they actually started to really test the customer acquisition mechanisms. What they realized was they couldn't get the unit economics right. And that's what we flipped the script on in Big Bet Leadership is upfront, truly focusing on those critical things that must be true to have a winning business model, from a customer experience, from an operating model, from a financial model, bringing those forward and figuring out lightweight ways to test those out so that we actually de-risk this initiative before we fully commit to it.
Like entrepreneurs are optimistic and they kind of have belief in themselves, and just so it depends on who's kind of leading the company as well. But like,
but the thing I would note is that entrepreneurs are different than major enterprises, right? An entrepreneur can afford an enterprise failure. In fact, in some ways, that's their job. You get 1 to 3 years to prove out this concept. And if it doesn't work out, the enterprise typically goes away. That's the entrepreneur's journey. Big Bet Leadership is written for established companies because they don't have that luxury, right? They don't have that luxury. And so what they do is, to manage that risk, they stop having big ambitions. And that in its own way is fundamentally what leads to companies being disrupted, right? They only do incremental things because we have a business. We have to protect it.
like Kodak would be a good example of that, really, wouldn't it?
Exactly right. But that type of disruption is going on today, right? Like in my hometown in Seattle, Washington, Starbucks is an example of a company that has gotten so locked into preserving the and growing incrementally that they've actually lost the ability to be on the offense. And Howard Schultz, the founder and CEO, has been recently very vocal about the problems at Starbucks and how they became bureaucratic. They suffer from the ABCs of corporate decay: arrogance, bureaucracy, and complacency. And so the key is being able to be dual-sided in your playbook. You have to be both a great operator, but you have to continue to maintain this entrepreneurial, innovative, exploratory approach. That's what Big Bet Leadership is for companies of scale, mid-sized companies and large companies who have a great existing model, but they've lost that ability to explore. And it's because it's very hard to do as an established company. That's why companies fail all the time. So Big Bet Leadership helps solve that problem of the innovator's dilemma, or the ABCs of corporate decay, as Warren Buffett would frame. So it's very different than kind of the entrepreneurial job to be done. It's how to be an entrepreneur. That's why I think Amazon is the most interesting company of the digital era. It's because it's one of the few examples of a company that has proven that they can be both world-class operators in a number of different businesses, right? Not just one business, but in a number of different businesses. And they have a very systematic and leadership-driven approach to exploring new business models, new customers, new products and services, new models. And their ability to have that dual-sided playbook is what Big Bet Leadership helps a company build.
Very good. If we look at like the likes of Facebook with Threads, which I don't know, is it gone? But I mean, obviously wasn't a success, and Google Plus, which was kind of like a Facebook kind of thing. Two-sided question, really. Like, one, how was the morale when something like that fails for such a big company? And two, when do you know to throw in the towel, when you kind of go, when you've got a big bet and you go, it's not working out the way we think it is. So even before it comes to like them ones were launched, but sometimes there's stuff going on in the background nobody knows about, but there's massive resources behind it.
Yeah. Does anybody remember that Google Plus didn't work? Right. The answer is no, right? And so to me, that's actually a success story in that Google was doing something beyond their core business. They launched product, they got customer feedback, it didn't work, and they moved forward. Companies actually need to have a bigger portfolio of things that don't work than a smaller portfolio relative to that. But the key is that portfolio has to be, even though we call the book Big Bet Leadership, the big is the size of the ambition. The big isn't the size of the bet that we actually make. The goal is to de-risk these things before we actually spend a large amount of money. One of my favorite chapters is a chapter that's called Think Big but Bet Small. And it's all about this mentality of how do you have grand ambition, but you don't bet the enterprise. You keep them small. Well, you do that by doing it early, doing it from a position of strength, launching product early, testing the market. Like that's the whole goal here. So I can't speak specifically as to, why Google Plus didn't work, but I think that they are one of the companies that does this relatively well of like trying things beyond their core business and realizing that the biggest risk we have is just continuing to do and optimize in the same business model with the same customers, with the same use cases, with the same value propositions as we've always had. We know that the timeline of competitive advantage is shrinking. It's harder and harder to have an actual advantage in the business. The only way to proven to do that is to continue to innovate. New customers, new use cases, new value propositions are the path towards maintaining competitive advantage.
Excellent. And with this kind of going on a little tangent, but I mean, when you were working with Amazon and just your own experience, like with companies when you're dealing with the Jeff Bezos or whatever, at what level do they kind of, because people sometimes they become friends with the owner at high level, and sometimes they want to keep them at a distance. This is your job and everything, and everyone has their kind of view on that, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, because sometimes it's like you're letting them in close to you and you don't want them to know, and other times because you've got a close relationship is why you're successful. And I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
It's obviously very situationally dependent, but the key thing for any leader is to not operate in just an echo chamber, right? Where people they're so eager to please you, they hesitate to push against you. And secondly, that all you're doing is hearing your own ideas and that things are great, and everything, right? And that's why this mechanism of writing out memos and debating the memos about a potential thing that you could do. So Amazon calls that the working backwards process. We reverse engineered that in the book. We call it thinking and outcomes, but that helps create the environment of independent thinking and the willingness to actually debate things and not fall in love with one specific idea. And so it helps leaders solve for this problem of basically everybody wanting to be a yes person around them, right? They're so eager to please. And while on an operating basis, like that eagerness to operate, that eagerness to please can be a good thing, when you're actually thinking about, well, what's the next thing could do? What would it be an alternate thing to do? How would we actually fundamentally disrupt or change our business? You need independent thinking, right? And so that can happen both within your team. It can happen by involving external advisors. It can happen by listening to things and listening to people that you fundamentally don't agree with. But what you have to ask yourself is the question, what would have to be true for this person's point of view or proposition to work? Well, what you're doing is you're testing ideas at that point, right? And so what good companies and good leaders do is they they fundamentally figure out ways to not operate in an echo chamber. And this approach of creating creative tension by thinking through things much better is really one of the first principles of how Amazon operates and what big bet leadership espouses to.
And like, 'cause sometimes a lot of the big companies, they'll see this, a company's innovative and they've got something. So rather than create it, they buy them out. And like, have you seen the difference? Because they tend to have a kind of buyout clause that the person, the top executive team or whatever, like, whoever the creator is, kind of works on a buyout clause 3 years that they're there. And other times they just buy. Like, have you seen the advantages and disadvantages of kind of bringing the team in when they do a buyout?
Can you
It's
restate the
it's
question again? Or
basically
sorry.
like say Google bought YouTube, and like
Uh-huh.
there's loads of smart. They buy these companies, and sometimes they'll buy a company, but they're just buying the software, the technology, and everything.
Right.
And other times they're actually buying the creators or the top team on it, and they have to be there for so many years, and like advantages and disadvantages of
Well,
situation.
again, it really comes back to your thesis of like what are you acquiring? Are you trying to acquire a customer? Are you trying to acquire access to a new market? Are you trying to acquire a technology? Are you trying to acquire the team and the expertise? And so having that theory of like what are the assets that we're actually trying to buy, and then creating the right environment for that to happen. So sometimes it's really critical to create separation for the team, to grow the market and to create tension between kind of the existing business and this new small business. Sometimes it's really important to integrate that in and get it through the channel and get it rebranded and as part of the organization. Sometimes it's important that this team operates very independently. Sometimes it's very important that the team becomes integrated. Sometimes it's important that the leadership of the acquired company actually leaves the company, because that's going to allow for these things to happen. So it's very situationally dependent, but it comes back to being clear upfront before you make the deal as to what are we acquiring, what's our hypothesis for how value is really going to be created, and then creating an environment that is attuned to that set of hypotheses versus having just one playbook or one model or one belief system on how to do acquisitions correctly.
No, excellent. And just finally, John, your company with your partner, you might tell us exactly what you're doing and how you're helping and who be ideal clients for you.
Yeah. So Rossman Partners, where I'm an author, an advisor, and a keynote speaker. And on the advisory side, we help our clients solve really complex problems in their businesses. And so we're kind of a bespoke advisory firm, and we do it by helping you both solve the problem that's at hand. Your digital transformation isn't going well. You have margin compression. Your cost structure needs a fundamental engineering. We help you both solve that problem, and we help you build a culture and an approach that then can be used for other types of purposes to think through these types of really hard problems. And so what we feel we do differently is we feel like we have a 10x power to weight ratio compared to other traditional management consulting, because we operate with a set of frameworks and a set of perspectives largely defined by the books that I've written. And we approach things with you and to help lead your team and tune your team versus doing the analysis and work for you.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I mean, I know there's probably more books in you, so when you do have another book, make sure you come back to us. You
I
might,
absolutely will.
you might let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find Big Bet Leadership, of course, at Amazon and any major bookstore. Beautiful hardcover book, great Kindle version, great audio version. You can get the resources that come with Big Bet Leadership if you go to bigbetleadership.com, and we've got a great set of resources to complement the book. And you can find me at johnrossman.com or on LinkedIn.
No, perfect. And yeah, I was holding up the book, but I forgot it's speaker. I have it on speaker view, so I just so people know what it looks like. There's the book, and I'll make sure I put the links both on the audio and the video. Thank you very much, John.
Roy, great catching up with you. Thanks again.
No problem. So that's all for the Speaking Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. Make sure you comment on what we said and what's your thoughts on all the different stuff. As long as not abusive, it stays up. Until next week, take care. So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. As mentioned at the start, you'll find my 6 podcasts on bio.link/podcaster. And also, if you'd like to start a podcast or do a podcasting tour, you'll find the information on that or on the QR code that's there. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, and share with your friends because it really helps. And also, I'd like to thank DanielPackard.com, helping people with fear, doubt, and anxiety. He's got a 90% success rate, and he's only charging if he helps you. So be sure to check him out, and you get a free call to discuss everything. Until next week, take care.